Well, thank you very much indeed, Peter, for reading for us. Those three verses, I think, foundational for our understanding of the Christian message. If we don't make sense of them, we won't actually understand the Christian message to the degree that we should. A number of years ago, I was staying in a house with a kitchen upstairs and bedrooms downstairs, and I heard loud sobs coming from downstairs. And I thought, well, I'm assuming the worst, and I head downstairs. And I find my wife actually reading the closing chapters of this book, Charlotte Gray by Sebastian Fuchs. Now, I probably will spoil the story. It's been out for a long time now. Two sets of characters. One set, adult lovers. They cross the cold threshold of the church into the stale air and head into blissful matrimony. And the other set, twin Jewish boys, aged 10, in the closing pages, cross the cold threshold of the gas chamber into the stale air and head into oblivion. And in the center of the book, for the careful reader, what Sebastian Fuchs has done is he's placed a philosopher who is there, I think, to make sense of this incident. No child born knows the world he's entering. And at the moment of his birth, he is a stranger to his parents. When he dies many years later, there may be regrets amongst those left behind that they never knew him better. But he is forgotten almost as soon as he dies, because there's no time for others to puzzle out his life. After a few years, he'll be referred to once or twice by a grandchild, then by no one at all. Unknown at the moment of birth. Unknown after death. This weight of solitude, a being unknown. And yet if I believe in God, I am known. I think that makes sense of these two incidents and the point he's trying to make, that without, I don't think you know quite what he makes of himself, but with no sense of the divine above, beyond, and so forth, whether you head into the gas chamber or into marital bliss, essentially meaningless. For if there is no God, no reality above, beyond, before, and behind, ultimately, well, what is the point? What's the purpose? I remember attending the first funeral I ever attended, actually, a cold February day in North Norfolk, the funeral of my grandmother, driving my little Peugeot 205 GTI away from the graveside and thinking, what is the point of it all? All of that relationship just gone. Well, the opening 34 verses of the book of Genesis, that's chapter 1 through to 2:3, take us to the very heart of this question. We've already made the point in the series that the opening chapter of Genesis through to chapter 2, verse 3, is the prologue to the whole of the Bible. This is, if you like, key stage 1 of God's syllabus. We've already seen how highly sophisticated it is as a piece of literature, and we've already spelled out what ought to be obvious to anyone who engages their grey cells, that this is not a science textbook telling us how the world came into being, but rather a word from God telling us where we come from, who made us, who we are, and why we are here. And these first 3 verses of Genesis chapter 2 take us to the very heart of that issue. Why are we here? What is the purpose of it all? What's the meaning of life? And I want us to see 2 things. I hope we'll have time for the second. First, looking at the text itself, that there's more that matters than matter. There's more to life than life, if you like. There's more that matters than just the matter in this world. And that there is, therefore, a point to life within this world. But then I want us to look at this text as it finds itself at the opening chapter of the whole of the Bible, if we've got time. And I want us to look at life beyond this world and see how Jesus fits into all of this. First then, more that matters than matter. 2 parts to this point you'll see on the handout, on the back of that handout you were given. First, the text itself, which we're going to look at very closely, so I hope you're ready for it. The text speaks of completion, perfection, possession, duration. And each one of these emphases indicate that there is more that matters than matter. Completion. Now, did you notice as we were reading something that I think very few people spot? That what God completes on is his work of creation. And therefore that the rest of which these verses speak is not a ceasing of work altogether. It's completion, not cessation. That much, I think, is plain from the text. Let me read it again. Thus, the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. Now, because the language used is the language of rest, and because rest translates the word Sabbath, and because people misunderstand the term Sabbath in the Bible today, just as the Pharisees misunderstood it in Jesus' day, so too often when we read this text, we have a picture of God taking a well-earned day off, as if God was simply exhausted. Phew! Wiping the sweat from his brow, putting his feet up, finding his favourite armchair, lighting his pipe, and having a bit of a break. Now here is the first shock of our reading, I think. God does not get tired. God does not need a sabbatical. Rather, he finished his work of making everything, and he sets to the work of sustaining and enjoying what he's made. Completion. Jesus reiterates that in the verses that Wes referred to when he was praying just now, when Jesus says, "My Father is working until now, and I too am working." God never stopped working. If he did, the universe would implode. Completion, perfection. Already we've learned that what God made was good. 6 times God describes his handiwork as good in verses 1 to 30. So chapter 1, verse 4, he saw that the light was good. Verse 10, he saw it was good. Verse 12, it was good. 18, it was good, it was good. 21, 25. And finally, on the 6th day, at the end of the chapter, for the 7th time in verse 31, God saw everything that he'd made, and behold, it was very good. Now, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I'm told that the number 7 in Hebrew signifies perfection. So 7 times it was good, or 6 times it was good. Once it was very good, the 7th, perfection. And now on the 7th day, as the 7th day is described for us in verses 1 to 3, on each occasion when the 7th day is mentioned, I am told, it comes in a sentence of 7 Hebrew words. So it's beautifully crafted. We don't get it in our English text. This is what the scholars suggest. And the point the author is making is that this universe, as it was created by God, is perfect. Thus, God rested from his work in creation. The purpose of his rest, his Sabbath, was to work at sustaining and enjoying what he had so perfectly crafted. Completion, perfection. Possession. Glance at verse 3, and you'll notice that he blessed the 7th day and declared it holy. He blessed the 7th day and made it holy. To declare something to be holy is to set it apart for yourself. It's mine. You put your mark on it. To bless something is to confer your favour upon it. I like it. It's good. I'm pleased with it. I'm not a culture sort of vulture. I'm a complete Philistine when it comes to culture, but my wife took me off to the Coulthard exhibition, collection down in Somerset House the other Saturday, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And you see this great masterpiece, and there you see on it, Claude Monet or whatever it happens to be. It's mine. I did it. I like it. I sign it. If you want something a little bit more basic, did your granddad have his own favourite chair? I remember saying to my grandfather once, is that your chair? And he just announced rather curtly, they're all mine, which was true. I thought it was put me down a little, but there we are. But here is God declaring it holy. He set it apart for himself. He conferred his favour on it. He declared it to be his. It's good. Completion, perfection, possession. And duration. Now here's the next, I think, big surprise, which I had never seen in years of reading it until a few years back. Just look at the end of verse 3 and see how it finishes. God blessed the 7th day and made it holy because on it he rested from all his work that he had done in creation. Now, do you notice that breaks a pattern? So days 1 to 6, God said, God saw, God made. There was evening and morning the first day. God said, God made, God called. There was evening and morning the second day. There was evening and morning the third. There was evening the fifth, the sixth. There was evening and morning the sixth day. He saw all that he'd made. It was very good. Now day 7, a complete break. No morning, no evening. There is no 8th day. This suggests then to the careful reader that this Sabbath rest of God is intended in its original setting as an eternal state of favoured, blessed existence in God's perfect creation. You ever built a house? We built a house once, and you move in and you can enjoy it. Completed a piece of software, that's something I've never done, some of you run, it's perfect, you move in and you enjoy it. Well, actually, probably it lasts about 3 minutes, doesn't it? Others have installed a new kitchen, you move in and you enjoy it. And there is here no end, no 8th day, an eternal rest. Now, I wonder if you can begin to see already, just from the text itself, within the text itself, that there's more that matters than matter. That there's a point and a purpose. I find it fascinating that the fundamentalist materialists, such as Dawkins and Jacques Monod before him, from whom Dawkins got many of his ideas, I would suggest, they seem unable to cope with the random pointlessness of their theories. And that makes me think, I wonder if their theory really stacks up. So when Dawkins wrote his Blind Watchmaker and then his River Out of Eden, he posited that the universe has precisely the properties we expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither cares nor knows. In other words, just completely random. Same with the Blind Watchmaker. What was the next book he wrote? Unweaving the Rainbow, to explain the purpose of why we exist. You think to yourself, doesn't seem you can live with your theory. Similarly, Monod, in his Chance and Necessity, is fascinating. We've quoted from him and the sort of random pointlessness of humanity. What is his last chapter all about? The purpose. You think to yourself, doesn't quite stack up with your theory. But within this text, we are learning that God has made this universe for an eternal, if you like, enjoyment in his presence of life, the universe, and everything. There's more that matters than matter. Just within the text it suggests that. And so you may have heard, the great prayer of Augustine, "Thou hast made us for thyself, and we are restless until we find our rest in thee." You were made for more than just carving out an existence in the matter of this earth. There's a 7th day, an eternity for which you were made to enjoy with the Creator. And I think you sense this, what I call restless dis-ease, in the weekend supplements. I've done my bucket list. What now? There must be more. I've mentioned before Robbie Williams' biography. Fascinating read. How does it feel to have all of this? Empty. Because you weren't made just for all of this. There's a 7th day rest. And you will be restlessly dis-eased until you realize that. Well, we're on track. This, then, what I want us to do, this point that there's more that matters than matter, is underscored, I would suggest, by the place of these 3 verses in the first 2 chapters. So we're still under point 1, and here is the second aspect I want us to look at. I have suggested already that the author is very sophisticated, and that every major chunk of Genesis is introduced by a phrase, "These are the generations of." Just let me show you again, in case you weren't here in week 1. 2 verse 4, "These are the generations of." Turn the page, 5 verse 1, "This is the book of the generations of." 6 verse 9, "These are the generations of." 10 verse 1, "These are the generations of." And therefore, chapter 1:1 through to chapter 2:3 is its own unit, a prologue. But before you start part 1, which we'll come to on Tuesday week, chapter 2, verse 4, we notice that there are 6 days that hang together, a unit of 6, 2 sets of 3. Days 1 to 3, God forms the world. Days 4 to 6, he fills the earth. And then there's this one day that sits, do you like, outside of the structure? It's not part of chapter 2, really. Comes before chapter 2, really. I mean, I know it doesn't here. That's because people added in the chapter headings in the 13th century. But as the author intended it, it's not actually part of the first major block of material. It's part of the prologue. But it's not part of days 1 to 6. It sits outside of days 1 to 6. Now, I was really helped in seeing, you're always asking, why has the author done this? Why has the author done this? I was helped by Henri Blocher, the French author, in the beginning, who says this. The narrative of chapter 1 to 2, 3 has 2 peaks, mankind and the Sabbath. This would be better expressed by saying that the creation of mankind crowns the work, but the Sabbath is its supreme goal. This protects humanity from total absorption by the task of subduing the earth. It anticipates the distortion which makes work the sum and purpose of human life. And it informs mankind that he will not fulfill his humanity in his relation to the world, but only when he raises his eyes above. That's brilliant. The essence of mankind is not work. And then he says there is a fundamental difference between the biblical and the Marxist vision. He might just as easily have said there's a fundamental difference between the biblical and the capitalist vision. Why are the weekend supplements so full of restless disease? Because our poor fellow citizens think that the fundamental purpose of humanity is to be found in total absorption in the task of enjoying and subduing the earth. No, that's not the fundamental purpose, you see. That's what we're being taught here. And so the fundamental purpose of humanity is not to be found in total absorption in pleasure or consumption or environmentalism or relationalism, finding the right girl or bloke, or work. You will only end your restless disease when you find yourself in God, because that's why you were made. Just like the goldfish out of the goldfish bowl feels a certain restless disease if you find him lying on the floor here. Of course he does, or she does, or it does, whichever way goldfish work, you see. You'll always be restless. Hence, as we head into a secularist, cold, sterile existence, full of discontent, because I haven't found myself in thee. Did you know that your purpose is not ultimately to work? Of course, there's a purpose for work in creation. We're given responsibility for God's world. We're to rule over and subdue it. God is a worker. So we shouldn't claim that working is somehow unspiritual. But even here in Genesis 1 and 2, we find that it would be foolish to try and seek all our fulfillment in work. And those of us who are chasing around the wheel like that blind hamster, well, actually they do it with their eyes open, we haven't understood why we're here. Now, I spoke on this to our Sunday evening congregation a number of years back, and I dug out the old talk after I'd written this talk, actually. I dug out the old talk, and on a Sunday evening there were around about 150 students and over 300 young graduates, and I thought I'll just quote you what I said to them. There is more to life than being a doctor. Most of them are medical students. There is more to life than passing your accountancy exams. There is more to life than being a lawyer or a surveyor or a teacher or a nurse. Don't mishear me. I'm not suggesting that work is not important, but we must not think like the atheist. There is more to life than work. Our job is not the ultimate purpose of God. We won't fulfill our potential by doing a job. or by experiencing the bucket list. We fulfill our potential by living in God's world under God's perfect eternal rule in relationship with him, enjoying his perfect rest. There's more to life. There's more that matters than matter. And you will always be restlessly diseased. And then I thought, just to really drive it home, I suggested this, and I think this is right. Do you know God, I don't think, is especially interested in what job you do? It doesn't matter terribly to him whether you're a plumber or a politician, whether you work for Linklaters or London Underground, whether you wear a suit or a sweatshirt to work. What he cares about is that you recognize him as your Lord and you experience life in this world under his perfect rule. So don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that we all move to Wales, buy a wigwam, live off nettle soup and tapioca for the rest of our life. God forbid. No, but we must understand the seventh day stands outside and gives perspective and shows us why we're here. Well, we've just got time to race through what is hugely important. There is a second area of application to the Sabbath, which once we have understood verses 1 to 3 rightly, we must tackle. And that comes as we consider the place of this Sabbath rest within the Bible as a whole. I wonder if you've been thinking, as I've been thinking, but the world we find ourselves in isn't perfect. He may have completed it, it may have been perfect, but it certainly isn't perfect today. This rest did not go on forever. Look at my life, my home, my relationships, and so forth. Let's consider this then within the Bible. Only as we understand Genesis 2, 1 to 3 properly will we understand Jesus properly. Flick forward to page 984, would you? Page 984, I'm hoping you will land in Matthew chapter 11. Remember, rest is Sabbath, Sabbath is rest. It's the same word. Now look at Matthew chapter 11. Is that where you are? James, are you in Matthew chapter 11? Verse 28. Great and famous promise of Jesus. I wonder if we've ever seen it for what it is. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you Sabbath. I will give you Genesis 2, 1 to 3. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me, you, submit to me, he says, learn from me. I'm gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find Sabbath, rest, for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I wonder if you've ever understood what Jesus is doing when he performs these miracles on the Sabbath. My Father is working until now, and I am working. What's he doing when he heals the man who's been paralyzed for 38 years? He's bringing that man into Sabbath rest. So that for which this creation has been longing from the moment of humanity's first rebellion against God, rest, relationship with our Creator, a perfect world that he has made without any sin, is fulfilled in whom? Jesus. As he goes to the cross, carries God's judgment at your sin and mine in his body on the tree, enables us to be forgiven and enter into the rest of God. What Genesis 2, 1 to 3 is all about. Now the Pharisees didn't understand that because they completely misunderstood the Sabbath. They thought the Sabbath was about not working. We've seen it's got very, very little to do with that. Even in Exodus 20, which you're all thinking about if you know your Bibles, when he says on the seventh day God rested, the purpose of rest under the Mosaic system was to remember that God went on doing his work of enjoying his eternal rest. And so the point of the Sabbath was not fundamentally about not working. It was about remembering that we are created for God in his eternal paradise. When we understand that, and we see that Jesus has come to bring us rest, Sabbath rest, then you realize just how big Jesus is. And that as we come to him, he welcomes us into his eternal rest, a new creation that he has prepared for us to enjoy with him forever. And so, God's purpose in giving the Sabbath was that we should remember he created this universe for rest and look forward to the coming of his Son, Jesus. Without Jesus, we will always be filled with restless disease. You will be. And you can see it all over our culture. Whether it's the bucket list or seeking to achieve your potential or chasing after your dream. And when you die, you will be, unknown to humanity within a couple of generations and judged by God. But with Jesus, everything changes. You've entered his rest. And when you die, you'll be welcomed by him. And you will look forward to enjoying his glorious Sabbath rest. There is a lot to think about there, and I hope you find it useful in the week to come. Do come and talk to me. I'll be here. I realise that it sort of slightly shifts the tectonic plates in some of our thinking. So if you want to talk to me more about it, I'll be right up here. I'd love to spend a bit of time chewing it over. Let's pray together. Come to me. Thank you for this promise. I will give you rest. And our Father, we long for that. Everything around us cries out for it. We're so frequently so stubborn and ignorant, we won't come to you for it. We thank you that your yoke is easy and your burden is light. I pray that you would enable every single one of us here to surrender to Jesus, to learn from Jesus, and so to enter into what we were made for. And I ask it for his name's sake. Amen.